Hello, I am Peter Okwacha. Welcome to Focus on Africa. Our top stories. At least 40 people have been killed by landslides and flooding caused by torrential rain in eastern Uganda. Hundreds are missing.
Many people have died, crops destroyed, houses taken.
South Africa's former foreign minister, Pik Botha, has died aged 86, leaving a mixed legacy in the country's apartheid history. A somber anniversary in Somalia, a year after the deadliest bomb attack in the country. The effects are still being felt as residents rebuild. Also on the program, speaking to an award-winning Nigerian author. Chibundu Onuzo's latest project sees her bring the story of her life to the stage. She will join us in the studio for a live performance. And in sports, more 2019 Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers taking place today with Egypt's match currently underway. Thanks for joining us here on Focus on Africa from BBC World News. At least 40 people have been killed by landslides and flooding caused by torrential rain in eastern Uganda on Thursday. Several hundred people are still unaccounted for. The government says rescue teams have been dispatched to the area near the Kenyan border. A landslide in the same disaster-prone region killed more than 300 people in 2010. Patience Atuhaire has the details from Kampala.
The raging waters that have brought death and destruction on the slopes of Mount Elgon. A landslide rolled down the slopes, wrecking homes and burying a trading center. Huge boulders rolled into a river, causing it to burst its banks. Most of the people were caught at a market.
Many people have died, crops destroyed, houses taken, many shops have been taken. Schools have been washed away.
It is feared that the death toll could rise. Rescue teams are still picking through the rubble, looking for survivors and victims of the disaster. The government says the entire mountainous region is at risk.
We have had 67 landslides between May and October this year. We have lost people in only one out of the 67. Reason being that we met with the people. We talked with them. We showed them safe locations within their villages. And we told them between May and December, there will be landslides.
A major disaster killed over 100 people in 2010. But the people of Bugisu region remain attached to their ancestral land. Thursday's disaster is yet another reminder of the tragedies surrounding the mountain. Patience Atuhaire, BBC News, Kampala.
Pik Botha, a key figure during South Africa's transition from apartheid era, has died at the age of 86. Mr. Botha served as his country's foreign minister for 17 years until the end of the apartheid era, after which he joined Nelson Mandela's transition government. But he wasn't a straightforward transition. In the early 1980s, he was one of the main figures in the apartheid government, relentlessly defending segregation during South Africa's years of international isolation. But in 1986, he caused controversy within the governing National Party when he suggested South Africa might one day be led by a black president. 4 years later, he served in Nelson Mandela's government as Minister of Mineral and Energy. He praised Mr. Mandela for his capacity to forgive many years later. And in 2000, Mr. Botha became a member of the African National Congress Party, completing his transition from pre- to post-apartheid politics. Anton Harbour is the former editor of the Mail and Guardian newspaper. He met Mr. Botha on several occasions, and I asked him how the politician will be remembered.
I think South Africans will remember him with very mixed feelings. You know, he was the most eloquent, loudest voice, particularly in the international arena, for defending apartheid and attacking its critics. And he did that with extraordinary effectiveness and energy at a time when South Africa was being isolated by the world. He fought the battle against that. So he's very much identified with the apartheid government, but he was seen as a reformer. He was seen among those members of government who were more verlig, as we call it, enlightened that is, and who were pushing for early negotiations and recognition of black leadership.
Not only did he serve under President Mandela, I mean, he also went on to join the ANC. I mean, how was this regarded back then, both by members of the ANC and his former colleagues in the apartheid movement?
It wasn't terribly significant, and it obviously had the feel of a bit of late life opportunism. But he maintained a good working relationship with the new government and the new authorities and the new system, although he was very critical in latter days about the ANC's actions on affirmative action, on its policies on affirmative action, and said he would not have supported those, which is somewhat odd because it's so fundamental to the ANC government.
You know, you could describe him as having had two faces. On the one hand, supporting apartheid. On the other hand, supporting change. I mean, you had a personal run-in with him. Tell us a little bit about that.
Nobody attacked South Africa's critics around the world stronger than he did. Nobody defended apartheid more eloquently than he did. But behind the scenes, and sometimes publicly, he did push for change and reform, but it was only change within the constraints of the National Party at the time. I personally, as many journalists did, clashed with him a number of times. I sued him once when he called me a terrorist that was stirring up violence. He was very much involved in the closure of the newspaper I edited in 1988-89. So we certainly had our run-ins.
What do you think his legacy will be in the annals of South African history?
I'm afraid his legacy is having defended apartheid for longer than was proper or decent, if it ever was proper or decent. While he did push for reform, it really had very little effect on the government at the time. He was said to have written a speech for Pik Botha in 1985 that allowed for the release of Mandela 5 years earlier than it actually happened, and that Pik Botha, the then president, tore up that speech and made one that had exactly the opposite effect, that delayed change for many years.
Anton Harbour speaking to me there on the line from Johannesburg about the late South African Foreign Minister Pik Botha, who's died aged 86. Let's take a quick look now at other stories making the headlines across Africa. 833 children have been released by a militia group fighting against the Islamist militant group Boko Haram in northeast Nigeria from the organization's own ranks. The Civilian Joint Task Force was formed in 2013 by vigilante groups in Borno State. It signed an action plan in September last year to end child recruitment. A number of gold miners have been killed during a landslide in the Democratic Republic of Congo's South Kivu province. It's not yet known exactly how many have died. It's thought 32 people were working at the site. Rwanda's Foreign Minister Louise Mushikiwabo has been elected as Secretary General of La Francophonie, an organization of French-speaking nations. It comes despite her country's switch to English as the language of education a decade ago. International human groups have criticized the decision due to what they call the repressive nature of the Kagame regime in Rwanda. Today marks a somber anniversary in Somalia. It's been a year since the worst explosion in the country's history. More than 500 people lost their lives when a truck packed with explosives went off on the busy streets during rush hour. The blast was felt across the city. Homes hundreds of meters away were ruined. BBC's Ahmed Adan visited the scene of the devastation, where the rebuilding is both physical and emotional.
The epicenter of the blast, hotels, government offices and restaurants, all gone. The car carrying the bomb exploded during rush hour here at one of Mogadishu's busiest intersections. The crowded pavements were filled with commuters at the time. The impact of the car bomb was made worse by the fact it exploded next to a fuel tanker, creating a massive fireball, taking the lives of 512 people. The attack, the deadliest in Somalia's history, did not discriminate. Among those killed were journalists, health workers, and students. Fauzia Saleh's husband was the main provider for their 6 children. Their youngest daughter is 11 months old. Amin Ali Ibrahim never had a chance to meet his daughter. He died before she was born.
He went Saturday morning and told me that he would send some money later and said a prayer for me. In the afternoon we heard the explosion. I called his phone, but it was unavailable. Unavailable. I searched for him all day Sunday, and by Monday I was struggling to be patient.
5 people were charged over their involvement in the bombing. 3 were arrested and judged by a court. A 4th was given a life sentence in absentia, and the last was sentenced to death. To this day, no group has claimed responsibility for the attack, but the government blamed Al-Shabaab. In 2017, Somalia's President Mohamed Abdullahi promised to get rid of the group within 2 years. Despite this, not much has changed in the country, but the government remains hopeful.
We've taken a number of steps, including reforming the security strategy and creating special forces to work on the security of the city. Local vigilantes, civilians and police are operating together. All those steps are bearing fruit and are enabling us to prevent anyone who tries to terrorize and frighten people. I'm hopeful.
A year later, these new buildings and businesses have sprung up, a sign, a clear indication of the resilience of Mogadishu's residents. However, fears remain that the same incident could happen again.
What happened can take place at any moment, and you might think that there are no more protection steps being taken. For example, when the disaster occurred, the most difficult was that there were no roads to enable people to access the victims and hospitals. And today, the challenges have even increased. Roads are still the same, still blocked by traffic jams or closed.
The scars are still fresh, and the consequences on that fateful afternoon last October are still playing out. One thing that remains constant in Mogadishu is that, despite the tragedy, life just goes on. Ahmed Hassan Adan, BBC, Mogadishu.
This is Focus on Africa from BBC World News with me, Peter Okwoche. Still to come, in tennis, Kevin Anderson out of the quarterfinals of the Shanghai Masters as Djokovic serves proved too powerful. I'm Peter Okwoche. The top stories this hour. At least 40 people have been killed by landslides and flooding caused by torrential rain in eastern Uganda. Hundreds are missing, and the authorities expect those numbers to rise. The former South African Foreign Minister Pik Botha, a key figure in the transition from apartheid, has died at the age of 86. Now, Kenyan athletes are in the news again, but not for their sporting achievements. Marathon runner Samuel Kalele is the latest to be suspended after testing positive for banned substances. Last month, a report on doping practices by WADA found that while doping in the country is not institutionalized, it's serious. The project also found that nandrolone and EPO are the commonly abused substances. Celestine Carone went to visit one laboratory and sent this report.
The World Anti-Doping Agency report described Kenya's doping practices as unsophisticated, opportunistic and uncoordinated, while maintaining the country does have a big problem.
We didn't see really big networks. We didn't see institutionalized doping. What we see is, what we saw is that athletes are not educated in respect of using doping substances.
We're still training our education personnel. We have not perhaps attained the optimum levels in terms of our outreach programs where we go to, where we are able to disseminate.
Since 2004, 138 athletes have tested positive for banned substances in Kenya.
Kenya is certainly top 3 in our risk countries, so the situation is quite bad, but I'm happy to say that I think the situation is getting better because we have got good partners in Kenya now.
One of these partners is Lancet Labs, the first WADA-approved laboratory in East Africa. Lancet's approval by WADA is exclusive to blood analysis in support of an athlete's biological passport, which really just reveals if an athlete has been doping. The lab is expected to plug the hole in out-of-competition testing for the athletics powerhouse.
What is ideal is for them to be able to go in, collect samples from the athletes at random, unpredictably, follow them up over time to see whether there are any biological changes related to EPO.
The findings of the report showed that EPO and nandrolone were the most commonly used drugs. This week, 23-year-old Samuel Kalele became the latest athlete to be banned after testing positive for EPO. Early this year, Olympic marathon champion Jemima Sumgong was also handed a 4-year ban after a positive EPO test. 3 other athletes, including former Olympic champion Asbel Kiprop, have pending cases relating to EPO. Celestine Carone, BBC News.
You're watching BBC Focus on Africa. Let's stay with the sporting theme. Mimi's here with all the latest stories for us.
Yes, lots of Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers, and that's more from the 2019 Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers today. 10 in total. In Group B, the African champions Cameroon with a 1-0 win over Malawi at home in the capital, Yaoundé. The only goal of the game came from the captain of the match, Eric Maxime Choupo-Moting. And Cameroon have already qualified, of course, as hosts for next year's tournament. The other two matches have finished with the results up on the screen over there. Angola with a win over Mauritania, and Gabon, which also includes Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang in that squad, with a 3-0 win over South Sudan. And 2 more matches kick off later today. 5 matches are currently underway. And one of those matches currently underway is Egypt, who are at home against Eswatini, formerly known as Swaziland. But ahead of the game, their coach spoke about Egypt's star player, Mohamed Salah.
Salah is a professional, but in the field of play, he will be an opponent. So they will compete with him, making sure that a Liverpool player who is a superstar cannot play and win against them.
And there are 10 more Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers on Saturday. One of them will be Nigeria, who take on Libya at home in Oyo in the first of their back-to-back matches. The Super Eagles, as they are known, are currently 3rd in Group E, but their midfielder Wilfred Ndidi says it's a game of great significance.
It's a very important game. This game will actually give us edge. It's a game we must win because it's at home. So we'll try as much as possible to give our best for a win. And if it comes out well, we all know we have edge to go for the second leg. Yeah.
And their opponent Libya, of course, their goalkeeper is expecting a tough match ahead. He's still confident of winning.
For sure, it will not be an easy match. Nigeria have many professionals playing in English football, but we will play with the determination to secure all 3 points.
Fill up more time. And to tennis, it was a repeat of this year's Wimbledon final, but this time it was at the Shanghai Masters, where South Africa's Kevin Anderson was beaten in straight sets by Novak Djokovic in the quarterfinals. 7th seed Anderson had 16 aces, but couldn't do much against Djokovic's serve. Interesting match over there. Of course, Kevin Anderson, he was hoping to actually not have a repeat of the Wimbledon final, but unfortunately it wasn't so. And finally, in boxing, South Africa's Zolani Tete defends his WBO bantamweight belt against Russian Mikhail Aloyan in Russia on Sunday. The fight will also double up as one of the quarterfinals in the World Boxing Super Series. And that's all the sports. Peter.
Maybe just before you go, let me just put you on the spot. What's the full name for EPO?
I'll put you back on the spot right over there. A very long name.
It's erythropoietin.
Ooh, good one.
I only know that because I've got it written down here. Thank you very much, Mimi. Thank you. Now, London's Literature Festival kicks off next week with an array of talks, performances and debates. One of the people taking part is a very good friend of the program, Chibundo Onozo, who wowed the literary world with her debut novel, The Spider King's Daughter, when it came out in 2012, as well as releasing her second novel in 2017. She released her novel in 2017 and now joins me in the studio. Chibundo, welcome once again. I mean, you're performing next week a stage show called 1991.
Yes.
What's it about?
So it's the story of my life so far in 9 essays interwoven with music and song and dance.
I mean, so why did you call it 1991 then?
Because I was born in 1991.
Oh, I see, I see.
I'm a 90s baby.
And you've already crammed so much into your life that you're willing to show everybody on stage.
Well, I think of it more as an oral history project. I think you can do a 1991 for anybody. So what year were you born, Peter?
I was born in 1968, actually.
Yeah, so we can do a show for you called 1968. Run through your life. You know, there was music at all the seminal points in your life. There were songs that are relevant to you. And I think for me, I come from an oral tradition, an oral literary tradition, and music is part of that tradition, and performance is part of that tradition. And so I wanted to write something that would bring together all my interests and all my passions into one piece.
And your interests, I mean, you've got so many interests, like I just said there, you know, you write books, you play music, you know, you're now doing a stage performance.
Yes, I have a PhD as well. I just thought I should get that
Well,
in there.
there you go.
I'm a doctor.
I mean, what exactly is your favorite interest?
What's my favorite? I mean, I don't think of it as favorite. I think they do different things for me. For me, writing sometimes can be quite cerebral. It engages a different part of my brain, whereas my music is more emotional, like it comes from a deeper, very personal place.
That's amazing. I mean, I've got just two interests, you know, work and then the couch at home. But, yeah, so what do we expect from you when you perform at London's Literary Festival next week?
Well, expect humor, hopefully expect to be entertained, expect very good live music. There's a live band, there's live singing, there is dancing. Just expect something fantastic.
Expect something. I like the way you switched to your Nigerian accent. Expect something fantastic. Talking about music, you're going to be singing us out of the program.
Yes, I am.
So if you walk over to the performance area and join the rest of your group, Chibundo and her singers are going to see us out of the program. But for me, that's it for today. Enjoy the music and have a great weekend. Over to you, Chibundo.